Can I call the panelists in the morning session, opening session, to please take their chairs? Good morning, Bulabinaka, Namaste, and warm Pacific greetings to each and everyone present in this lecture theatre. I have the very pleasant task of being the master of ceremony and chair of the first and opening session of the 2016 Pacific Update. My name is Vijay Naidu, and I'm Professor and Director of Development Studies in the School of Government, Development, International Affairs, and Acting Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economics here at USP. The chief guest, Honorable Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Professor Rajesh Chandra, the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of the South Pacific, Her Excellency Ms. Margaret Twomey, Australian High Commissioner, Vice President Bambang Suntano, Asian Development Bank, Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute, representatives of Asian Development Bank, Professor Stephen Howes, and colleagues from Australian National University, scholars, policy makers, development practitioners, paper presenters, USP staff and students, ladies and gentlemen. I have two pleasant tasks this morning. Firstly, to warmly welcome you all to this opening session of the 2016 Pacific Update on Lodala campus at USP. The Pacific Update reminds me of the Pacific Grade series of lectures that used to happen at USP in the 1970s and 1980s. Very seminal, very important in terms of policy making in the region. And my second very pleasant duty is to introduce 7 preeminent speakers in the morning session, beginning with the first 3 sitting in front of you. Being mindful of the time constraints, I will introduce all the speakers sequentially in terms of their presentation, and then I will sit quietly, which is one of my pastimes these days. Before I introduce them, I wish to make just 2 acknowledgements and a quick comment. First, I wish to acknowledge the indigenous stewards of the Suva Peninsula on which Lodala campus is located. And also to remind ourselves that this campus, the headquarters of the premier regional university, is a peace dividend, being formerly the base of the Royal New Zealand Air Force and subsequent partnerships in the region. The campus, of course, has been immensely transformed since the late 1960s, and especially under the leadership of the current Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajesh Chandra. Second, I acknowledge the organization and sponsorship of the Pacific Update by the Pacific Department of the Asian Development Bank in Manila, the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, Development Policy Center, Crawford School of Public Policy, Australian National University, Canberra, and the School of Economics, Faculty of Business and Economics, USP. Considerable amount of behind-the-scene efforts have taken place to bring this conference together and to make it a success. And we are at the take-off stage of what I hope would be a very successful conference. Please let us put our hands together to express our appreciation to this partnership and the efforts of their personnel. Now my comment. I'm delighted that the theme of the 2016 Pacific Update Conference inclusive growth and enhanced resilience resonates very well with Samoa Pathway and the SEED's accelerated modalities of action and what is referred to as green economy and blue economy of sustain, and as well as the alignment with the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. Implicit in the theme is the acceptance of the huge paradigm shift towards a genuine desire to commit future Pacific Island countries' development to the three bottom lines of sustainable development. So before I introduce the speakers, I wish to call our Galanders to Galand our chief guest. And the Australian High Commissioner. So I begin by introducing our Vice Chancellor and President of the University of the South Pacific. Professor Rajesh Chandra has been Vice Chancellor of the University of the South Pacific since August 2008. He served as Foundation Vice Chancellor of the University of Fiji, and then he returned to USP, as I said, in 2008. Prior to going to the University of Fiji, he served USP for close to 30 years, where he held a number of senior positions, including Acting Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor Academic, and Director of Planning and Development. Over these years, he also made significant contributions to the international academic community. He was chairman of the Executive Committee of the Commonwealth University Studies Abroad Consortium from 1999 to 2003, and he was also a member of the Technical Advisory Committee exploring the feasibility of a virtual university for Commonwealth small states. Within the Pacific region, Rajesh was part of the Pacific delegation to the World Summit on Sustainable Development, and he has attended the Pacific Island Leaders Meeting, the Commonwealth Education Ministers Meeting, the Forum Economic Ministers Meeting, the Pacific Islands Forum, and the General Meeting of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. Professor Chandra holds a PhD from the University of British Columbia. I go on to the Australian High Commissioner. Her Excellency Margaret Twomey is a senior career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT. Ms. Twomey has previously served as ambassador to the Russian Federation. Do you explain the Russian Federation's behavior these days? Ambassador to East Timor, Deputy Head of Mission of the Australian High Commission here in Suva previously, and also had previous postings to London and Belgrade. Ms. Twomey holds a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors Russian and French from the University of Melbourne. The Honorable Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Fiji. Prior to his appointment as Cabinet Minister following the first ever truly democratic election in September 2014, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum was the Fijian Attorney General and the Minister for Justice, Anti-Corruption, Public Enterprises, Communications, Civil Aviation, Tourism, Industry and Trade, and the Minister responsible for elections under the Bainimarama government. Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum attended Maris Brothers High School. He completed his Master's in Law degree at the University of Hong Kong. He holds a graduate diploma in legal practice from the University of Wollongong in Australia. He obtained his Bachelor of Laws degree at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. He attended his Bachelor of Arts, majoring in Political Science and Development Studies, degree from the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. He is admitted to the Supreme Court of New South Wales and to the High Courts of Australia and Fiji. Prior to his acceptance of the position of Attorney General, he was the General Manager, Group Legal and Compliance and Company Secretary of the Colonial Group of Companies in Fiji. Besides being a senior legal officer at the Director of Public Prosecutions Office in Suva, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum has also practiced law with Minter Ellison lawyers in Sydney, Australia. I also was asked to introduce the speakers and panelists in the overview session, and I'll do so now. Is Emma Bebet, Director, Asian Development Bank. Emma is Director of Urban, Social Development and Public Management Division in the Pacific Department of Asian Development Bank. Previously, she was Principal Economist in the Pacific Department, responsible for macroeconomic monitoring, research and regional programming for the Pacific. She also worked with ADB's Pacific Sub-Regional Office here in Suva. There, her work involved economic analysis, country programming, and project administration. She joined ADB in 2005, following a period as economic advisor with the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat in Suva. And you may want to read the rest of her biography. And moving on, Bembang Susantono, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, ADB. Mr. Bembang Susantono assumed the position of Vice President, Knowledge Management in July 2015. He is responsible for management of ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department, and Department of External Relations. Before this, Mr. Susantono was Vice President of Indonesia's Ministry of Transportation and Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Regional Development. He has extensive experience providing policy advice to government, private sector organizations, and international institutions. Moving on to Mr. Barry Whiteside, Governor of Reserve Bank of Fiji. Mr. Whiteside was appointed the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji in May 2011. He was appointed for another 3 years term on 20th May 2015. Mr. Whiteside was educated at Suva Grammar School and went on to obtain a Bachelor of Degrees in Economics and Administration from the University of the South Pacific. He was the recipient of USP Awards for Studies in Administration. Later, as a Commonwealth Lead Scholar, he completed the Masters of Arts degree in Economics from Simon Fraser University, Canada. Governor Whiteside is a career central banker and has been with the Reserve Bank of Fiji since 1977. Edimon Jinting, Director, ADB. Edimon Jinting is currently Director of Economic Analysis and Operational Support Division at the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department of ADB. Prior to joining ADB in 2007, he had extensive international experience, including working as an economist at the International Monetary Fund, advisor at the Indonesian Parliament research economist at the Productivity Commission Australia, research and lecturer at University of Indonesia, postdoctoral fellow at Monash University, and research economist at Gadjah Mada University. Mr. Jinting received his PhD in economics from Monash University. Ladies and gentlemen, said we all welcome them very warmly. So it's over to you, Vice Chancellor, to give the welcoming address. And as I said, the other speakers just follow sequence after Professor Chandra. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Naidu. the Chief Guest, Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Public Enterprises, Civil Service and Communications, Honorable Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, and I've said on previous occasions, he is the Minister with the most responsibility in the Fijian government, the Australian High Commissioner, Her Excellency Margaret Twomey, Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Pro-Chancellor and Chair of USP Council, Mr. Winston Thompson, Vice President of Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Bang Susan Tono, the Dean of the Asian Development Bank Institute, Dr. Naoki Yoshino, members of the ADB team, and there's a fairly good number of people from ADB here, the Director, Development Policy Center, Australian National University, Professor Stephen House, and I similarly acknowledge his team here, members of Council, Senate, and their committees, the Acting Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economics, Professor Naidu, members of the senior management of USP, distinguished speakers, invited guests, colleagues from the Fiji National University and the University of Fiji, staff and students of USP, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the University of the South Pacific and on behalf of the organizing committee, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the 2016 Pacific Update Conference, about which Professor Naidu has spoken. And as you know, this is jointly hosted by the University of the South Pacific, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank Institute, and the Australian National University's Development Policy Center. And in many ways, this sets the tone for the kinds of partnerships that will serve our region well. And I welcome that partnership very much. I extend a very special welcome to our chief guest, Honorable Sayed-Khaiyum, because we know, Honorable Minister, how busy you are and how difficult it is to get to be the chief guest at these functions. So we appreciate your acceptance to be with us and to open the very important development dialogue, perhaps the most important development dialogue on the Pacific. And the Honorable Minister told me earlier on that he'll stay on for the sessions until tea. So we welcome that very much, and thank you, Honorable Minister. So the value of this update conference is that it gathers policymakers, researchers, academics, development practitioners from the Pacific, but also brings other people from around the globe who will share their research and policy experiences, so that all of these, if we do it well, can help the Pacific governments and people and the development partners in finding sustainable solutions to their main development problems. In order for us to improve our development outcomes, we must take full advantage of the global opportunities and deal effectively with the current and future threats to our region coming from the same global community. And we need a combination of national, regional, and international perspectives and benchmarks. In a way, this update encourages all of that. And how well we, or what impact this update will have, will depend on all of the people involved in this update today. The theme Professor Naidu has already talked about is inclusive growth for enhanced resilience. And there are sessions on a whole range of things from economics, finance, governance, regionalism, information and communication technologies, environment, climate change. In fact, a very interesting range of topics. And the themes are especially important for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we have for the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. I would like to express the university's appreciation to the key partners who continue to enable us to hold this very important update and dialogue. And this, of course, is ANU, the ADB, and the ADBI. The university enjoys a very cordial and productive relationship with the ADB. And we are trying to strengthen that further. The strength of this relationship is exemplified by the visit that was made by the president of ADB last year to USP, Mr. Takechio Nakoa, to this campus, and in this very room where he gave a lecture and it was streamed worldwide. With the ANU, we have a very strong relationship. And ANU, of course, has a long history of being involved in the Pacific. I recently discussed the nature of the relationship between ANU and USP with the new Vice Chancellor. And we both agreed that we can bring new energy and innovation in the way we relate to each other, so that relationship recognizes the centrality of the University of the South Pacific, the other regional universities and Pacific institutions in the development of our member countries. We have always recognized that one of the roles of USP is to be an umbrella organization where we can get people to discuss and to dialogue, to link teaching and research and policies together. And we will continue to support this kind of activity, and we want to indicate that we are open to various partnerships that support the development of Pacific countries. We are, of course, at crossroads in the Pacific. The new framework for Pacific regionalism defines, in a way, a change in the manner in which the Pacific Island leaders wish to define their future, and in many ways it shifts the manner in which they wish the development to occur. And this calls for much greater sense of ownership and responsibility on the part of Pacific Island governments in their own development. Greater responsibility for Pacific governments and people to think more about their development and their solutions. Greater recognition and understanding, greater recognition and understanding from our development partners of the importance to give time and space and opportunity for the Pacific governments and people and institutions to think more about what matters to them and to come up with solutions that properly reflect the vision and ambitions of the Pacific countries. And solutions that are deeply rooted in the reality and the experiences of the Pacific. Recently, our Pro-Chancellor, Mr. Thompson, launched a new book on the new Pacific diplomacy, which indicates a trend in which what used to be a fairly closed Pacific is now opened up very significantly to the rest of the world. where our countries are wishing to explore tremendous opportunities that exist around the world. If our countries can do this, and also at the same time keep the other reality uppermost, that our individual and collective collective success depends on working together in the Pacific as well as working together with others. So regional cooperation and integration is going to be a defining feature of our success. In order for the region to harness these opportunities and to think more clearly as to what it wants, to deal with them more confidently and beneficially, then I want to argue that we need to focus significantly on the capability of our institutions and people, of our public service, etc. The most important measure of our success will be the quality of our people, as some governments are recognizing. It will depend on the innovation in our society, the agility of our response, and the competitiveness of our society. Because we all learn that the world is a very unforgiving place, and nobody is going to sustain anybody in the Pacific without significant cost to those societies. This, I think, calls for much greater discussion around education than we see in development forums, because education is the foundation, and particularly tertiary education, which actually gives the people with the intellect and the thinking and the agility and research and development that defines the ability of a country to carve out a competitive niche. In summary, we need to think much more about the nature of research and development and the creation of knowledge society in the Pacific. Just as important as this education is, so is political cohesion and the creation of a strong sense of nationhood. And I bring this up because as we explore multiple areas, it's very easy to forget that the most important element of how we will succeed is if we have this strong sense of nationhood, a shared vision, etc. We also know that conferences of this kind take a lot of financial and human resources. And our presence here today and the money we have spent has opportunity cost because we could be doing other things. It is vital, therefore, that the benefits of the presentation and the benefits of a dialogue like this goes out to the rest of the population. We are therefore streaming the presentations live so that other people in the Pacific and other people around the world can benefit from that. The media will be very active in disseminating the findings. All of the papers will go on the web. And I hope very much that all of that will mean that this dialogue has real impact on the people that the money and the time is spent for. We will have an evaluation of the conference, and I wish to encourage all of you to be honest in your assessment so that the next time this update is held, it can actually address any of your feedback. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, I wish all of you and all of us the very best in our deliberations for the next 2 days. And as I said, I always say this at conferences, And I hope that that will lead to a demonstrable, significant impact on the development outcomes and will promote resilience and inclusiveness in the widest sense of the two words. Binaka Bakalebu, Shukriya, and thank you.
Good morning, the Honourable Attorney General, Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, Vice Chancellor of USP, Rajesh, Chandra, and all the distinguished USP team here. Our colleagues from the Reserve Bank, Vice President of the ADB, Suva, Dean of the ADB Institute, Dr. Yoshino, and the ADB team. Distinguished participants from all around the region, including the Cook Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Kiribati, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Republic of Marshall Islands, Timor-Leste, Tonga, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and of course from our host country Fiji and my own country Australia, and in particular my ANU colleagues. Good morning, and thank you very, very much for the invitation to give these opening remarks, albeit at this rather early hour of the day, or an early hour for academia as I remember it as a student of Melbourne University. I want to begin by thanking the Asia Development Bank, the ADB Institute and the ANU's Development Policy Centre for their support for this conference, and of course the University of the South Pacific for hosting us today. And thanks to you, Vice Chancellor. Where have you gone? Oh, there you are. Thank you very much for your very salient observations about education and the very serious matter about the development of institutional capability. Policy dialogue is its most fruitful when it brings together different schools of thought, and I think it looks like we've got that today with an impressive array of participants. Over the next 2 days, we have a chance to share knowledge and witness robust debate on new research and methodologies. And I'm very pleased, this is the ultimate aim of being able to generate more effective public policy. I'm really pleased that this year's theme is inclusive growth and enhanced resilience. This is a useful headline to describe what we need to drive positive economic change in the Pacific. From Australia's perspective, the agenda is particularly pertinent. It includes many of the key issues Pacific governments are grappling with at the moment, many of which are also pillars of Australia's partnership with the region. Issues such as fisheries, labour mobility and climate change. In the Pacific, inclusive growth and enhanced resilience go hand in hand. Together, they're critical to achieving prosperity in this region. There is no one definition, of course, for inclusive growth. We know that growth is inclusive if it reaches large parts of the country's labour force. It is growth that takes place in sectors where poor people work and where poor people live. And it uses methods of production that poor people possess. The purpose of Australia's aid program is to continue to contribute to sustainable economic growth and poverty reduction. We consider inclusive growth to be critical to reducing poverty. There is strong evidence that economic growth is good for the poor on average, but averages can mask slower rates of poverty, slower rates of poverty reduction among particular groups, such as subsistence farmers or others at the bottom of the income distribution. They can also distract us from focusing on those who, for various reasons, do not or cannot participate in economic activity that can raise their incomes. These groups may not have the ability to respond to the opportunities that economic growth presents. Gender, violence, geographic isolation and disability are all potential barriers to economic participation. You will also be aware of the challenge in the Pacific, that the challenge in the Pacific is as much around vulnerability as it is around poverty. The geography, the lack of economic diversity and dependence on certain imports means that economic shocks are common. A household's poverty status can change with one cyclone. An inclusive growth approach to the Pacific therefore also needs to focus on building resilience at the household level right through to the country level. And as I said, the two are intertwined. So what is Australia doing to support inclusive growth and enhance resilience in the Pacific? Well, we're reducing barriers to economic participation to ensure that everyone can benefit from the growth in the economy. For example, by investing in women's economic empowerment as well as disability inclusive development. I know something that the Attorney General is particularly focused on at the moment. We all know that people can also be excluded from participation due to conflict and violence, and that's another reason we are dedicated to ending violence against women in the region. Again, a big focus of the Fiji government. We're investing heavily in climate change adaptation in the Pacific, with an aim to reduce the impact of climate shocks at the household, community and the country level. And we are working closely with the private sector to improve financial inclusion, including through bilateral programs, but in particular through a major regional initiative, the Financial Inclusion for the Pacific program. At the macro level, making the most of trade opportunities, building strong and capable labour forces and encouraging investment are critical. Through PACER Plus and our ambitious Aid for Trade agenda, we're working to support regional connectivity, address infrastructure gaps, and improve access to international goods and labour markets. Likewise, good budgetary management, building financial buffers for shocks, and exploring options in relation to insurance all play important roles. As such, our development assistance will continue to target improvements to economic governance and the business of the environment. As people with an intense interest in the development and the well-being of this region, and as aid practitioners, we must be constantly incorporating new thinking into the work that we do. Drawing on international experience and bringing together people and ideas in the Pacific context is an important way of doing this, and it's why we're here today. I'm sure that this specific update will provide an important source of fresh ideas and perspectives to meet the development challenges of our region. With that, I wish you good luck, stimulating debate, free and frank exchanges, as we diplomats like to call them, and I hope some enjoyment and some fabulous networking at all. Thank you very much. Dinakabaka level, Dhanyavad Shukriya.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You'll have to excuse me. I shouldn't be here. I should be in bed. You've got the Vice President, the Vice Chancellor, of course, Mr. and Mrs. High Commissioners, the Chancellor, USP, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, the Secretary of Finance, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me much pleasure to be here. The wonderful thing about having two esteemed speakers before you don't actually have to say much. They've actually said it all for you. But it gives me much pleasure to be here at the opening, as I would like to essentially highlight what the Vice Chancellor has mentioned, and that obviously some of the challenges that's faced by the Pacific Island countries. Inclusive growth and enhanced resilience, obviously, can have a number of connotations and indeed meanings and applications. It's not just primarily for the economy, but as highlighted by the High Commissioner. It does address issues or needs to address issues such as the actual social methods within society. As I said, if you take it from purely economic, commercial perspective, tourism, of course, is very big in the Pacific, and indeed it contributes about 35% towards our GDP in Fiji. A majority of the people who work in the tourism sector are women. People who clean after you, people who wait on you, people who clean your bathrooms, your bedrooms, sweep around the place. They are women. If they're being bashed up the night before at home, what do you think their level of productivity would be the next day? What do you think is the rate of absenteeism? Our garment industry, of course, plummeted from about 20,000 workers to about 3,000 workers. Today it's grown to about 7,000 workers because Fiji is able to remodel itself as a garment manufacturing center, if you like, for specialized, or doing low volume but high end And so we've got about 7,000, 8,000 workers. Majority of them, 95% of them are women. So it is everybody's responsibility to ensure that we bring such matters into the public domain. They should not be captured or only relegated to the private domain, and indeed it's not something that should only be talked about by women's organizations. It is everybody's business. The Pacific, of course, faces a number of opportunities, but also challenges at the same time. We do not, for example, have the economies of scale within our own countries. We do not have economies of scale surrounding us. As I said at the International Forum recently, in the Southern Pacific, we have a population base of about 10 million people, of which nearly 8 million comes from Papua New Guinea. Balance of the 2 million is shared by 12 or 13 other countries. So your ability to attract private sector investment, your ability to have a lot more competition within your market, your ability to, for example, restructure your state-owned enterprises does become limited because of the fact that you do not necessarily have economies of scale. Because your ability to attract private sector participation, again, is limited because of the fact that many companies won't look at you because you don't necessarily have the volume. So it is very, very important, therefore, that the Pacific Island countries actually do collaborate with each other. And this is why such a forum is very critical, because it does bring the Pacific Island countries together. It does provide the opportunity to look at many of the challenges that actually are cross-cutting within the Pacific Island countries. And hopefully the donor countries, the various development partners, funding agencies, are able to also take a leaf or actually gain some knowledge from that. And we, of course, need to learn from what is happening within the wider sort of context outside the Pacific. Just to give you an example, we have, in Fiji, we have something like about 105% more SIM cards than the actual population base for IT and for mobile phones. Because, of course, some people, as you know, have more than 2 mobile phones. So there are more SIM cards than actual people in Fiji. But that does not necessarily mean that everybody is connected in Fiji. It does not necessarily mean that we don't have, black spots or brownouts. We have, of course, at the same time, a very sort of substantial gap in the connectivity between the Pacific Island countries. We are very lucky at the moment. For example, the Samoans are now building a cable, or laying a cable from Samoa to come to Batuanga here to connect to the Southern Cross Cable. And Fiji, of course, is very lucky to have the Southern Cross Cable land in Fiji. So the Samoans are building a cable that will pass between Twomey and and Vanuatu. That will then give us the opportunity to build a pipe out of it and land it in sub-Saharan for a cost of about $6 to $7 million US to get the people of Vanuatu connected. We talk about sort of the challenges of rural-urban drift. We talk about huge-scale migration from Vanuatu, people living in squatter areas in the Suva corridor. And many of the reasons why they do come to these places, of course, apart from things like land leases not being renewed, is also the availability and accessibility to modern-day services. So the challenge, of course, for Pacific Island countries is to be able to connect the people within. And I think that's part and parcel of the inclusive growth. Because if you do not have inclusive growth, as the High Commissioner also mentioned, then you actually continue to marginalize people. And this is why we have decided also, recently at the World Bank gathering in Washington, to look at the measures of inequality within society. And inequality, or your measurement of how well you're doing, is not simply measured by your growth rates per se, but it must actually be measured by inequalities that exist within society itself. And I'm happy to say in Fiji, at least in this context, the inequality levels have dropped quite significantly compared to what it was about 10 to 12 years ago. So Pacific Island countries, I think, as far as development partners are also concerned, is that I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, probably slightly more than that, we had the Solomon Islands minister, we had meetings with him in Suva, and they talked about some anti-competitive behavior that existed in Honiara. They did not necessarily have the skills and the resources to set up a separate Commerce Commission. So We sent across some people from the Commerce Commission in Fiji to help them, at least whether put in place some measurements that they can monitor through the Ministry of Commerce. But I think there's a lot of opportunities within the Pacific or Pacific Island countries to collaborate. Some of us, of course, have advantages over other countries, and then we have other advantages in specific other areas that we may not necessarily have. So the idea is, and also with the academics here, with the various people who may have done research and all the other stakeholders, it is also very important for the government officials who are here to be able to tap into your knowledge base for governments to make good decisions. Because I think the ability to make decisions for government and the right decisions is greatly enhanced once we have perhaps a plethora of ideas that we can actually choose from and see what is most suitable for us. I know we're supposed to finish the session at 9:10, we've already gone past that by 10 minutes. But just very quickly, I think also the other point that I'd like to highlight is there's a very critical need to capacity build within the Pacific. We have recently, and much to our delight, we have been talking a lot about in the international fora about the ability to upscale our staff and the government officials in the Pacific, not just in Fiji, but in the Pacific widely. For example, to be able to access climate finance. It's called climate finance, some people call it green climate fund finance. But it is a bureaucratic jungle. It is a bureaucratic nightmare to be able to access these funds. You can access some of these funds through grants. You can access some of these funds through soft loans. But there's a number of permutations through which you can actually put together proposals. But there's very little knowledge about it. So we've gone into partnership with UNESCO, and we're beginning from next month, we are holding some informal sessions and bringing in Pacific Island officials to know about climate finance. The reality is that we are the cold face of climate change, notwithstanding the fact that our carbon footprint is always negligible, but the fact of the matter is that we are the cold face of climate change, and we need to build resilience, not just at the economic level, but also physical resilience. But in order to do that, you need to be able to access the funds. And in order to do that, you need to know how to navigate through this maze of accessing funds. So it's this capacity building that is very, very critical, and we're trying to build that capacity building within the Pacific region. We've also overall, just to give you an example, I think what is very critically important is recently we were at a gathering in Singapore, well probably not recently, but before Cyclone Winston, where the Singaporean government has, on a biennial basis, held meetings of civil aviation ministers meetings. And ICAO now has decided to jump into the area of carbon emissions. So rather than looking at the overall carbon footprint of a country, they're actually looking at the carbon footprint of the civil aviation industry per country, which means that all of a sudden, Fiji's carbon footprint is greater than Australia's. Because the reality is that the Pacific Island countries cannot actually drive to each other's country. We actually have to invariably fly. So the carbon footprint for the civil aviation industry becomes greatly enhanced. So this week on Thursday, as it transpired from the meeting in Singapore, we are holding a meeting of civil aviation ministers in Naidu to be able to have a joint position to the ICAO meeting in Montreal in September to say that this methodology of aggregating your carbon footprint is completely wrong. Because you need to be able to look at the overall carbon footprint of a country. So there are specific needs of the Pacific Islanders. They need to actually fly more than perhaps a French person who can drive across to Switzerland or wherever they can drive to, or go by train, whereas we can't. So these are some of the issues that I hope that you're able to discuss too, in respect of some of the specific challenges vis-a-vis international standards and norms that are being set that could actually put us out of kilter. And I think that is very, very critical to also discuss. Similarly, our ability to connect to various other, for example, restructural reforms that takes place in state-owned enterprises, I think is very critical to be able to contextualize it in the Pacific context. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very successful workshop, conference, and I'd like to thank once again ADB for the participation and collaboration with the USP. Of course, the Australian government through the AMU has participated in this previously, and I'd like to thank them for that, and I wish you all a very good morning. Good night. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that the opening session went very well, with the speakers making very pertinent statements about the theme of the conference, and I ask you to give them another round of applause.